Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Open House Show with Jesse Meadow, your host. This week we have great special guest, Tiare Police from Hawai'i Preparatory Academy. We're going to be talking a little bit of the continuation of our conversation last week on some of the challenges facing our boarding programs across the U.S. With COVID mitigation. We're also going to talk, given the time, now that we're getting into November, we're going to talk a little bit about retention as well. So without further ado, let me bring her on. All right. Hey, Tiare, how are you?
Hey, aloha, Jesse. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Couldn't have picked a better guest for this episode.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure. I hope I can help offer some good information. So
absolutely. You're so distant from the mainland. I love getting the perspective of how things go there, because you're really in a different world altogether. And with the picturesque surroundings, I know we'll get to this a little bit later, but a lot of the moving is going in your direction. So, but before we get to some opportunities that you're having over there, let's talk a little bit. I know you. Many people sometimes go and work for the schools that they graduated from, but you have so many different perspectives from HPA. Tell us a little bit about your history there and all the different perspectives you hold.
Sure. Yeah, so it's pretty rich. My dad attended HPA back in the 60s, and my uncles. I'm born and raised in Hawaii, so I'm part Hawaiian. I'm from Hawaii. I'm from this island. So that's, really special to me. And then I attended this school as well. My brother and cousins, and then I've had two kids graduate. So they graduated in 2013 and 2015. And then I have a daughter who's a senior. So she's been here since kindergarten. This is supposed to be her amazing senior year, but it's turning out to be, little less than that, but she's adapting. So yeah, and then I started as director of admission. This is my third year. Prior to that, I've been here. I'm in my 12th year overall. So I was in the alumni department, and then switched over into admissions, and was on the road with you and all kinds of other people as an assistant, associate, and then now running the show for the third year. So fun times, but challenging as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The open house show should start being, guest by guest. We're trying to bring the band back together.
There's a payoff here, I hope.
Absolutely. So, with all those years, I mean, you were a child, a student, a parent, an administrator. What have you seen change over the years over there?
Well, I mean, lots of things have changed. I mean, the good news is there's a lot of the thread of consistency has been here, as far as, the essence of the school, traditions, sort of the anchoring principles of being a school in Hawaii. We have a lot of cultural influence. A lot of that has stayed the same. Of course, things have changed, right? Things have changed with technology, just, with core values, just sort of things that support our mission. Have evolved in a lot of great, healthy ways. So, I'm glad it's not the school it was when I was here, just because, the kids have so many more resources. They're just so much more elevated than, and it's been fun to watch that over time, even from when my son was, graduate in 2013, till now with my daughter in 2021, it's changed. So just trying to really stay current and follow what kids need. The world is different. So.
No, absolutely. It's crucially important that, schools take the time, and for the most part they do, but, take that time, really look at their mission statement. How do they revamp it to the practices that are going on today? My colleague Chris was on, I don't know if it was the first show or the second show, but he was talking about, how schools used to prepare what they think the world is going to be. And now schools seem to be preparing for the world that it actually is. This is the reality.
That's a big part of when we speak to prospective families now. It's like, yes, there's a traditional style of what a school is and what we all know as school, and tests and notes and, projects and things like that. But then it's really shifting into this more progressive style of what does the world need out of these kids, and how are we preparing them to, think differently and think on their feet and have a conversation amidst this technological world, and just the stuff that really boils down to launching a successful, 18-year-old into the world. We have to really make sure we're covering all the bases.
Yeah, and these days the bases are overwhelming. Kind of getting to that. Right now, I mean, we're dealing with obviously the pandemic. It's the number one issue, no matter what industry that you're in. But with us in independent schools, right now the kids are in person, correct?
Yeah. So we opened in person in August. We set out over the summer. We were watching and planning, constantly planning like everybody, really planning on opening. We were set on that. Our state allowed us to do that. It was like our cases were super low. Our island was closed to visitors, so we were looking like a really healthy option. So yeah, we opened in person and we've been in person since, knock on wood.
Awesome. How has that been working for you? I mean, obviously there might be, how many boarding students do you have on campus?
We have about 140.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how has that been looking, as far as, pretty much every school that I've talked to, including my old alma mater, the minute you introduce the day students, that's when things get, where you're not inside that bubble anymore, that you create. How has that been working out for you guys? What are some things that you've done to try to keep it mitigated?
Yeah, so far so good. That was, of course, the biggest worry is you create this bubble with the boarding students, kind of train them on protocols and procedures and things like that. And then what we do is our day students come to school every day. They have to go through a temperature check and sort of this, routine questions, if they're feeling unhealthy, stay home. So we can do our best with just, temperature checks and things like that. And then we've really, worked at training them with mask wearing is basically all day. They have to wear masks. I mean, they can take it off if they're, in certain instances, they know now we're in a good rhythm when they can take them off, and they really respect the rule to keep it on. And then the distancing, right? How they sit at lunch, how they sit when they're studying, where they can go. We just opened up, lunch was really restricted into their advisory. So we kind of said, let's start with advisory lunch. They sit in the same sort of location. And then about 3 weeks ago, we opened it up into these, like what we're calling blue zones on campus, where now you can go have lunch with whoever you want, as long as you stay in these zones, and they're down in the field playing kickball and volleyball. Like it's like bringing them back to almost like a recess, almost like basic enjoyment is like what they're feeling right now. They're like, oh my God, we get to go play kickball on the field. Whereas they never would have chosen to do that before. They're finding like small joys in just simple behaviors, which is sort of one of the cool little outcomes of amidst, the restrictions, which can be a bummer. But they're figuring it out. We measured all the spaces before opening to see how many people we could fit in a classroom. Luckily, we have, great weather pretty much all year long. So, and a lot of outdoor spaces. We have 220 acres. So a lot of our campuses, we can have outdoor classrooms, which we already had. So thankfully we were somewhat built for this issue.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because you have such good climate. I would imagine that you're, maybe you were already using your campus a lot more, but now it's more of a priority because you have to. What does boarding life look like? As far as during the school day, obviously you have your protocols, your classes. Outside of that, there is a whole boarding experience. What does that look like these days?
So, it's of course dialed back to what it was, right? With like several outings on the weekend and a lot more freedom. We've had to really kind of scale it back and explain to the families and the kids, just for safety reasons, we have to watch this, kind of don't get too aggressive with how we with our desires to roll everything out. So we we have a bus to the beach every Sunday. They can opt in and still do that. That was always a trip. We take them into our town to go shopping, but there's a little more routine, like protocols to that. They still have activities. There's a lot more on campus because if there's any spike in the numbers, which is still low, like we're in, very low numbers, but we did just reopen our island to visitors.
Okay.
About 2 weeks ago. So we have to watch that, right? Because inevitably we might see something shift. So we're being cautious, but still understanding that kids want to get off campus and, do what they came here to do, which is go on hikes and explore and get outside. So it isn't as robust as it once was or that we'd really like it to be, but it's still enough to keep them engaged and happy. They can check out with day students, which is another like, okay, let's just be cautious about this.
Right.
But with them understanding and buying into our protocols to stay open, which they prefer, they've really clung on to participating in that with us, which is nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I have to say, I think I might have even said it on every show that we've had. The kids genuinely seem to be reacting in a way that they understand that they don't want to be stuck at home in their rooms on a laptop. They're enjoying having FaceTime, personal time with their friends. It is what it is. This is how life is today.
Yeah, everywhere.
They just adapt.
Exactly. And they understand that if they weren't here, they'd be somewhere else having to do still COVID routines and maybe be more restricted. So, when I check in with some kids, they're like, oh yeah, I'm having a great time. Like it's still, way better than my school in another part of the world. And, so, that's good feedback.
Yeah. And, I hope to get some, some New England schools or schools up in the north, because, when I talk about, some of the boarding expectations and the boarding life and experience, most of the schools that, I talk to, Hawaii, California, us in Florida, if we can dodge the rain, even during the winter, we have a ton of outdoor events. We have space. We have activities that are, social distance. But, when it starts to get into those blizzard months up north,
right.
like you're really going to be stuck inside when you're stuck inside or outside. That's your only option. So, what are they planning for quarters during that time? I guess,
I think they'll be inventive and again, their kids are just as resilient and they'll be like, oh, we'll be fine. We'll just do this inside and they'll figure it out and they'll roll. And, it'll be, I'm sure it'll be fine and happy.
Absolutely. And, we've actually had a conversation previously, talking about some of the challenges about enrollments, dealing with it, the borders experience, but those are the ones that are here, looking ahead to the future. We're starting to get into what we were traveling together there in this time, so, what are some of the obstacles that, HPA is experiencing? I would imagine they're similar to others, but maybe not. Maybe there's some unique ones there that you guys are seeing with trying to figure out with enrollment this year.
Well, what's interesting about us is being on an island, we've always been like isolated from like the fairs that everybody goes to do constantly and the constant contact that people with a closer proximity can have more touches. And, so if anything, it's like the world has caused like a very level playing field of sorts where it's like everyone is on their little island now.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone's having to figure out how to do sort of what we've always had to do, which is just like, hey, over here, like, without being able to like go places physically and like attend different, events or host many different, fun things for kids or revisit days or open houses. We've always struggled. Like people don't just come here for like an open house day. We always have had to recruit virtually.
Yep.
Because most people honestly come sight unseen. Like they can't come pop over for a revisit day, right? It's like, it's Hawaii. So for us, we're just sort of enhancing the stuff we've always done. We're doing, of course, many more virtual, events, for prospective families. And then of course, retention wise, we're doing a lot more for current families, like we're doing like coffee talks with the head of school, or trying to pair parents together through a new enhanced parent engagement sort of effort. So we have a new committee, as you know, we're part of several committees when you work at boarding school.
Yep.
So I'm on the parent engagement committee. So that means like, how do we keep parents like happy and knowing what we're doing? There's no football games to attend and run into friends and make plans to, they can't socialize like they used to. So that's been a worry for us. Like, are parents feeling welcomed? Are they feeling like they're part of a school? Or are they only getting what they can read through email, which is a lot, right? Like,
and
when this virtual, it's sort of like, wow, I feel like you can overwhelm families with, too much digital content. So it's like, how do we bring them together even face to face, which has been successful. Like, they've asked on Zoom meetings, they're like, oh, we want more time together. So I think it's just getting creative, and at least, trying to employ our students to do a lot more outreach, like ambassadors, parent ambassadors, things like that.
Yeah, that's good. And I remember being impressed, now Tiare's got to be 7 years ago, maybe. And, Josh was there, Josh Clark.
Yeah.
He had the drone footage. And I was like, that's so cool. Like that, like to be able to visualize the place like that. I mean, that was way back then. So, you guys have always been a little bit ahead of the curve as far as the digital representation. And like you said, it's something you have to do because they're not coming for a campus tour. You're not going to get those tons of families that are hitting up 3 or 4 schools and seeing them all in one general region. You're really out there. So
exactly. And we're Hawaii, so a lot of people are like, it's Hawaii. Who wouldn't want to go to school there, right? But it's Hawaii. It's where people vacation and honeymoon, and they don't think about like, oh, school, right? It's not an automatic that people would think there's a viable school option. So we have to sort of make sure we highlight like what makes us different. An island school wherever it might be a school that's remote, whether it's, Vancouver Island or somewhere remote in New Hampshire, it's like you have to sort of give people that why, and that it's not just an automatic like known entity that it'd be like, wow, boarding school in Hawaii? I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, are they going to just surf all day? Do they actually even go to school there? But, so it's a lot of communication and storytelling and just I love letting the students speak for us and, talk about their results, but also talk about the balance of their lifestyle at a school like ours, where they're the sense of aloha and like ohana or family, or where they really take on the tenets of the Hawaiian principles. It really overflows onto our campus, and the kids can just kind of feel at home, but still, knock it out of the park and do whatever they want to do as far as their goals.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely a unique cultural experience that you're going to have there. That you just can't avoid it. It's all around you. So any trip that they go on, anything that they interact with around the community, obviously the staff is mostly around the community. All that gets brought in to their experience. So that's interesting. It kind of brings us to our next point. You pinned on it a little bit when you were talking about, your engagement with the parents and how do you keep that community feel during these times. We spoke before a little bit about the transition of and flow of people to the island. What have you guys been seeing? Did you get that COVID boom that so many other schools might have been seeing?
Yes, definitely. We had a sort of like a whole nother admission season towards the end of the summer. Once California announced that they were all going online, like everybody was like, oh no, we need to get our kids in person somewhere. So we definitely saw that COVID boom at the end of summer. Many people, particularly from the West Coast, but really all over, own second homes here. It's like their vacation spot. And so what we found is a lot of people either moved here in March when this whole thing started and their kids were remote. And then they decided, you know what, we're just staying. And they wanted to enroll their kids here. Or they were basically like, we need to get out of where we are and move to, you know, many places in the US. I'm sure Florida is one of them, but Hawaii for sure. So our real estate market was just like booming, or rentals you couldn't find. And then of course schooling. So, you know, a lot of people were looking at us as an option, whether it was for boarding or day students. So we had to cap our enrollment. We were like, no more kids, even though we still had a lot of people interested.
Yeah.
It was sort of like a whole different like deal, you know, and then because you're limited on physical space.
Right.
We can only fit so many kids in a classroom. So therefore, even though normally we could make it work.
Throw the extra desk in there.
No, they're like, no, there's the desks are full, like,
right.
It's safety first. And so, because, you know, in admissions, we're always like, oh, come on, one more. You got it.
You'll be fine. You know you can make this work. Not anymore.
No. So it's like a Tetris situation of figuring out how to fit kids. And even for the mid-year, we have a lot of interest for people to start in January that we literally have to figure out, and yet maybe another creative way to help them be able to come, but also keeping in mind our, you know, physical layout, our teachers and their, you know, energy level and their ability to like teach all these kids well and feel safe and good about it. So again, we're in a position in November of like, okay, what do we do? Do we put some tents up? Do we hire some more teachers? Do we, you know, so now it's like the mid-November admission season. Yeah. While we're still trying to plan for August of next year, where it's an unknown of like, what is the world going to be doing? So it's a lot of fun.
It's always good to be in the unknown.
But yeah, Hawaii has certainly been a place like we've seen a lot of people move and either want to be day students or they want to send their kids as boarding students. So, but you know, again, it's a reaction to what the world is doing. So we have to be ready what if things shift back or another way? We can't hinge everything on this sort of boom that we're experiencing. We have to be, you know, have a kind of conservative approach and the aggressive approach to figure out how to, you know, how to handle that.
That totally makes sense. And, you know, that's the big question, you know, once public schools get it together, you know, and again, that doesn't seem like it's going to be around the corner. But, you know, when you start talking about August plans, that's definitely the conversation there. What does the world look like then? What does school look like then? What are the options for parents going to be at that time? And then, you know, on the private school and the independent school and, you know, how do you adjust? You know, it's always been that battle to show your value. And a lot of things are very specific to each school about their values. You know, generally speaking, education across the board, college preparatory across the board. But then you get into your unique things like the culture of Hawaii or, you know, the different programs that each school has. And then you start to focus a little bit more on that. And that goes to the storytelling process, you know, that you're doing digitally or through ads or however you might do it. But, you know, when you talk about retention, it's difficult to know what you're competing with because once things are back to normal, what does that look like? Was this really just only for 1 year? Or is this something that, you know what, parents are going to be committed to, you know? Right. What are some efforts or some initiatives that have worked well for you guys with retention?
Well, I mean, one of the things is trying to identify upfront who came in as sort of like a one and done. Like, we're just here for a year. Yeah, that's it. We're going to move back. And then also asking earlier, like we're asking soon. We're going to say like, hey, look, do you happen to know, based on looking forward, are you like definitely moving away? Are you definitely now staying, or are you not sure yet? Trying to get an earlier temperature read on our families, just to give them, just to kind of figure out, like, we can't assume it's just like before, it's like the typical attrition. Things could really, really adjust, right? So we're also looking at our financial aid differently so that we can, more people are going to be in a position of, it's complex. They want this education, but it's, you have to pay for it. So based on their, losses of jobs and, things that happened due to the pandemic, people may not be able to be, affording independent school as readily as they once were, right? So we really have to consider, how are we going to adjust helping families, and how are we going to gather that information and make awards for the families to uphold our socioeconomic diversity that we really value. We want to be sure we keep kids here and we're not losing them just because they can't pay for it anymore. It's like, what can we do to adjust on our end to plan for that? But still, of course, we have to, keep the school open and pay everybody. And, it's like that business sense, trying to really take a closer look at that. So, I mean, and then retention, as far as like student happiness, it's really just kind of adjusting. I think the kids and the parents we've all grown as humans through this pandemic. Like, it's sort of we appreciate the little things in life maybe more than we did before. Not that Absolutely. We've lowered our expectations or lowered our bar, but we've just kind of said, like, really, like, what's really important, like, and then try to feed off of that, which is, basic principles of happiness and safety and friendships, and trying to just keep that at the forefront. Not necessarily always just chasing, like, their success and next things and like on the mill, kind of keeping the focus on the outcomes, but not narrowed in on those, being like, okay, let's widen our vision as a school. Let's talk about mindfulness. That's been on our radar for like a few years now, right? It's like a trend with mindfulness and just really, but that, this whole time with retention, it's like, really, like, what does that mean? Like, finding peace and just kind of dial it back, but in a good way.
Yeah, there's definitely been parents, students, as well as us as staff members and faculty, a lot of reflection. And you're right. It's not lowered expectations. It's just looking through a different lens, at how things are, taking a little bit more appreciation to things, which obviously will create a more, positive environment for you, positive experience for whoever's doing it. I know when, back when we had our retention meetings, we would have, the coaches in there, we would have, the deans of the different levels. And, it was just so interesting because when you try to find out, you try to recognize those students that are only here for a short time, or maybe wanting to go, or maybe have a disgruntled for whatever reason, and how you can address that. Like, so many different perspectives get thrown into the mix when you have those kind of, come-togethers. And you can really address it from so many different angles. There's a lot of reasons why students choose not to come back. And, during these times, especially when you're looking at a conservative outlook of this is most likely going to be one and done. How do we keep those students? How do we keep that revenue? Because like you said, it is very important, especially when you think long-term, when you're playing the long game. When you've got a kid in here that is about your school, they're about your mission. They love it. They breathe it. They live it. They're going to, sell it as much as they can. They're going to be good alumni. If they have the opportunity, they're going to send their kids there. Do you want to let go of someone like that that's bringing so much value to your community over a price difference? But you got to pay the bills. So, admissions directors, boards, headmasters, they're going to be in this situation throughout this whole year, trying to balance, keeping that student population, keeping that culture going, but at the same time, managing who's available out there, what competition's available, and how they're going to address that. So that's really interesting. Are there anything new? Was there anything new that came out of this pandemic as far as retention initiative?
Well, we're definitely doing a lot more digitally, right? We have like our head of school does a video every week. So from the very beginning, actually from before school started, and mind you, he was finishing his first year when this all started.
Okay.
So,
throw it to the fire.
It was really cool because he just, trying to make things feel more relatable and friendly, but yet informative. So we did a lot more like short videos where he was addressing the families about a subject, coupled with every Friday school bulletin, which we've had off and on over the years, but sometimes it can be too much and like no one reads it.
Right.
And it's like, so we reinstituted this Friday bulletin, which is per section, lower, middle, and upper school, and easier to navigate for families. But again, trying to give them, front loading them information, very transparent, trying to be really open, and building that trust to, give them security that we're doing what we need to do to keep their children safe. And then at the same time, here's how we're going to continue to enrich their life, like what you're paying for, which is, the education piece, the physical movement piece, the, character building, all the stuff that why they choose a school like ours. So just more touches in a variety of ways, and just pivoting, just trying to be as creative as we can.
Absolutely. Well, I usually try to wrap it up with, what's going on in your neck of the woods, because it's always interesting to hear how different places are going. And we've talked a little bit about that during the call already, with the influx of people coming to Hawaii. Is there anything else that's in regards to enrollment, what are some trends you're seeing over there today?
Well, it's the international world is quite unknown, and it feels like more at risk with the fact it's been on the decline anyway, right, nationally, as far as international boarding is concerned. And then you add the political climate that was happening, and you add a pandemic, and different relations between countries, and it just feels a little more dicey. Like I worry more about that aspect of it, which is a real favorite of our kids on the campus. It is to have those international students come and add all this, character, and just they're just cool, and they bring a different aspect of the world. So I'm really hoping I can figure out ways to keep that moving. But yeah, a lot of kids from the mainland, are interested. And then I think the tricky part of enrollment is going to be balancing all of these different buckets. We're not a day school. We're a boarding school with day students. Right. So we really have to continue to make sure we're keeping the balance of our population, and not get desperate and just start, filling the seats, but really still looking at like who's really a good fit for us, who's how are we building our community. So I think that's ahead of us in this round of, so we have our kindergarten through 8th grade day program, right? That's at a different campus. It's all day students, whether they've just moved here or they've been living here. And then we have our upper school, which is half boarding, half day, and then kids from all over the world. And so it's trying to maintain that feels, a little more stressful, but still possible. So talking to colleagues, talking to you and other people in this industry, and there's a lot more information now with all of these different virtual options and opportunities of continuing education and meeting up with people or chat rooms, or there's so much. I think it's figuring out what to dial into and finding your people and being like, okay, like, dude, what are you doing for this? Like, how is this working? And just being much more collegial than ever before. Like if I try something and it's horrible, I will tell my friends, like, don't do that. Like, it sucks. Like, and find out, and people can share information just more freely, and there's less like competition feeling. Although of course it's still there because schools all need to enrollment, but I think it's really opened everybody's hearts and minds to like information is exchanged on a really cool level.
Yeah, I think that, and I actually wrote a piece about this a few weeks ago, the thought sharing that's going on. And usually what happens after post-crises that everyone is feeling the effects of together, it's in their best interest to have this motivation and to move things forward. It's not in school's best interest as a whole to have this industry get picked off one by one. Because of lack of information sharing, of lack of data, of lack of knowledge and direction. It's really crucial that, the regional organizations, the national organizations, the relationships between people, that continues to build those kind of conversations, because it is going to be a lot of trial and error. No matter how old or prestigious the school is, everyone's facing this world together. So
reinvention is everything. And I think if you look at it from we're going to have our stressful days and hard decisions, but I think if you look at it as a real opportunity to like flip some things around, maybe get rid of some programs that weren't working, that you were just stuck with.
Yep.
We're going to be having a winter. We've always had a summer session where we have boarding students and day students come and do like a 3-week or 2-3-week sessions. Now we're going to have a winter and a spring break session, because we understand like a lot of our boarders can't go home, or they don't want to go home, or their parents want them to stay. And we've always had our campuses closed for winter and spring break, but now we're developing some like sessions, like legit, there's a director of it, there's programming, there's a budget to, people can opt in instead of fly home, and if they're worried about travel restrictions, and then we have a plan then to bring everybody back to campus and start again in January. And it takes a lot more management, but I think it's opening doors to maybe programs and things that we've always wanted to do, but we haven't been forced to. And now it's like, okay, this is our chance. So.
No, that's excellent. And, there is a lot of opportunity to try new things and to be creative. What do you feel, I guess I'll close with a positive note. What do you feel the biggest opportunity is going to be coming from? If you had a crystal ball, I guess.
Well, that's a hard question.
No pressure. All of the open house audience is relying on this answer, so no pressure.
Oh no, you froze. That's karma right there.
That's what happens. That's what happens. I had to put you back in the big screen. Now everything's okay. No one wants to hear me.
I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest opportunity is like, just if you keep the kids in mind and like your desire to really provide a quality experience for kids, everything will flow from there. So I think it's keeping your eye on the heart of the matter and not getting too into the weeds and logistics and the stress, but like going like, hey, what are the kids? Keep the kids first, and then roll from there. So I think then doors open, people step up to help, ideas can flow. If people start feeling pinned down and like this is a forced thing, then I think opportunities get dull and people are like, oh, don't ask me to do anything, So I think letting the students stay at the focus, then it'll all work from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. I think, keeping them at the focus is going to really make everyone in their own ways creatively get through this and make that experience so much more for them, because they're getting robbed of so many normal traditions. It started with the class of 2020, and it's just it's a generational thing. It could pass, but right now, how can we make the best of it for them?
Yeah, and stay grateful. Stay grateful for the things that we do have, right? We still have, like, I look out my window and it's like kids are still like laughing and getting dressed for sports and, socializing and like going to class and doing stuff. So it's like helping remind them like they're grateful for that. And I'm grateful they get to do it. So in our work, I think it also, that's, if I need a boost, I just go like hang out with the kids, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is why,
right.
this is why it's worth it.
Now.
Yeah. Okay, let's, you know, because you get bogged down with meetings and planning for the fun and planning for all of it. And then you have to go and like sit with it for a bit and go like, okay, it's working. It's good.
Yeah.
I mean, people are happy. Like, call a mom that's happy. And like, of course there's issues. People, you know, it's not all fun and games. Like there's triaging different issues, but it makes it all work. If you just, I think gratitude is like a big theme for this year.
That is an excellent perspective, and you are absolutely right. I hope that more people can hold on to that. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Yeah.
It was great talking with you and catching up and
Me
learning
too.
all things HBA.
Thank you for having me, and aloha to everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. See ya. Well, that'll do it for us this week. Next week, we're actually going to be taking a break, and will join us on the 23rd. Thank you so much. Have a great day and a great week.